Hi good people, my name's Titus, and today we're going to be going back to our MiniMap prototype to add some additional functionality. We'll be implementing a zoom function for our little map, so let's not waste any time and just jump right into it. Alright, so last we left off we created the little map widget. It's able to rotate and translate based on the player's movements, so we'll just give the player the ability to kind of move their mouse wheel in and out and have it just zoom the map in and out dynamically. So first thing we'll need to do is create an action so that player can push a button to actually do that. I am using the third person template for this example, so I'm going to go to my input folder and it has some predefined actions, so I'm going to go there and just right click, and then under input I'll do input action. I'm going to call this IA_zoom. If we open up the action, it defaults to a digital boolean. I'm actually going to switch this to an axis 1D, and then I'm going to add a single modifier for negate. This is optional. I am doing this because I like it when I mouse wheel in, I want it to zoom in, and when I mouse wheel out, I want it to zoom out. The default behavior is inverted, so I'm just going to add a simple negate modifier to get it the way I like it. So I'll just save that there. We can then come to our input folder, and the third person template uses the IMC default file. So we'll just open that up, and under mappings, you can see the predefined mappings they have created. We're just going to hit the little plus sign to add in our zoom, and then select it from the drop down, of course. And then you can expand that out and actually assign your button or your key bindings for it. I'm just going to hit the little record button, and then I'll mouse wheel up or down, and it'll store the actual button press. Now this one also, I'm going to add in a required modifier. This one is going to be the scalar modifier. We're going to set the scalar to be a really small value, like 0.1 in the X, Y, and Z. We're only using technically one value, but just put it in all just to make it uniform. The reason we have to scale it to a really small value is because in our material, when we created the mini-map in a previous video, it actually takes in a value between 0 and 1. This typical button press will return a value between -1 and 1, so your zoom functionality would be very quick. So we'll basically scale it down very small, so it'll be a gradual step as the player increases the zoom and decreases the zoom. Hopefully that made sense. But we can save that there, and now we need to go into our content drawer, and the majority of the setup is actually through the material, and this one I called it m_map. In the previous video we called it m_minimap. The code's going to be the same as the previous video, so if you want a full breakdown, I highly recommend going there. Just a brief overview. You basically create a material, you set it to be user interface with the blend mode set to masked. You then pass in your image texture, which you capture from a camera in the world, and whatever overlay design you want, typically a circle with a little dot in the middle or a triangle. You multiply them together, pass it in the value, and then you mask the alpha channel out in the opacity mask. We then created some code for the zoom and offset, which you can see here, and that's primarily where we're going to be working today. But then we also added in some code for rotation, so the map will rotate as the player rotates. You can achieve that through items called material parameter collections, as well as, of course, a custom rotator. And then last but not least, we used some translation code, which actually moves the map left and right, up and down, based on some V or U offset that we are modifying through the player blueprint. But for this one, we're going to be working in zoom and offset. We're basically going to be replacing this hard-coded scale value. So like right now, like if we select this, you can decrease the scale and you can see it zooms in, and I can increase it to zoom out. That's essentially, we're just going to be doing this through code from the player blueprint. The way we do that is through what's called a material parameter collection. We created one previously. It just has 3 scalars, one for the U offset, V offset, and one for the rotation, which is called yaw. We'll hit the little plus sign to add in another scalar, And we'll just call this one our zoom. And I think a default value of 1 will work just fine. Now this is expecting a value between 0 and 1. So we'll have to clamp that in the player blueprint. But I'll walk you through that. So I'm going to set that to be our zoom value now. And I can plug that in here and in here to completely replace that scalar that we had previously. So now if I save that, the material is pretty much good to go. Now we just need to do the player blueprint code. So I have the third person template, which means I'm using the third person character. So we'll go to the event graph there, find an empty space, and we can just search for our zoom input action, which is what we created earlier. So I'll select that, and when it's started, I want to set some zoom value, and then I want to set that scalar parameter value. We'll need to track the zoom value, so let's go to variables and click the plus sign. We'll just call this our zoom, and we'll set it to be a float. Compile and save. Our default zoom value should be a value of 1, and then we can hold the Alt key, drag it in to get a setter. I'm going to be using the started instead of triggered, so it only fires once. You'll get different behavior if you go off a triggered. It's basically not going to. It'll probably zoom in a lot faster than if you do started. So if you want that behavior, go for it. But I'll pull the action value. We'll come into an add operator. I can get our current value for zoom, add in the 0.1, which you remember we're scaling it, so it's not 1 or it's not -1 or 1. It's basically going to be like 0.1 or -0.1. So it's going to be real small increments. So it'll either add 0.1 or it'll subtract 0.1, and then we can clamp that. So we'll do a clamp float, and we can clamp it between 0 and 1, which is perfect, and then pass this into our new zoom value. Now this just basically sets the value, but it doesn't set the scalar parameter collection. So you'll need to call a function called setScalarParameterValue. You'll then pick your collection. I'm doing NPC demo for this one. And then you'll have to target your parameter name. And this one we called it zoom. And then I can just pass in the value. And then that is basically it, and that is set. So now if we compile and save, there's going to be an issue with it, but we will be able to zoom in and out. That works great. You'll notice though, if I move to the corner of this map, on the mini-map, it's not lined up right. If I zoom out, you'll notice it kind of lines up correctly there, but if I zoom in, it pulls me further away. The translation of the map is happening from the player blueprint as well. We're doing that off the movement code. So this movement function is called, it then adds some movement input using a forward and a right vector, and then after that we're setting the scalar parameters for the U offset and the V offset. The way we're doing that is we're getting the world location of our player, we're splitting it, and we're taking the X value and we're dividing that by our map size, and that's the U offset. We then take the Y value, we divide that by the map size, and that's our V offset. Now we do go in depth into this in the mini-map videos, so if you need a better breakdown, I would defer there. But because we're adding some zoom functionality, we basically need some way to scale this so the stepping is set correctly. The way we can do that is we can basically take the map size and we can multiply it by your zoom. And then you can pass that result into the division as you had it before. So if we take this over here and we press Control D to duplicate it, I'll pass the map size into here, pass this into the division. This should correctly scale our map. So you'll notice if I go over here to the corner, and if I zoom in, you'll notice it's off, but if I move, it resets correctly. So if I zoom in, it's off again, but if I move, it's correct. And if I'm moving while I zoom, it's correct as well. But why isn't it correct when I'm not moving? Well, that's easy enough. In the player blueprint, we are only calling this function when the player moves. So we need some way to call it when the player is zooming. So you could manually write out all that code again, I think, just to make this video short, or probably make it in a function would be better, its own function. But what we can do is we can actually just simply call the move function and just not pass in any X or Y value, because that will still call the set scalar. So if we do that and save and then play, I can actually go over to the corner of this, and then if I zoom in or zoom out, it's calling that move function. It's just not moving the player because we're passing in 0, but it's also calling the set scalar. So we now have a way to zoom our minimap in and out. All right, everyone, I think we'll cut it here, but I hope you found some informative value that you can take into your own projects. But as always, thanks for watching, consider subscribing, and we'll see you on the next one.